Hi, everyone. This is AJ Schneider from Loyalty 360, welcoming you to another edition of our Leaders in Customer Loyalty Industry Voices podcast. In these episodes, we talk to the leading agencies, technology partners, and consultants in brand loyalty about the technology, trends, and best practices driving unique experiences, engagement, and ultimately customer loyalty. This episode is part of our 2026 Trends series, where we're talking about what patterns and best practices we're likely to see in the upcoming year. Today, we're speaking with Ellen Green, Vice President of Loyalty Strategy at Bounteous, a digital transformation consultancy that helps brands unlock growth by connecting data, technology, and customer experience to drive measurable business outcomes. Welcome, Ellen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, AJ. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, this being kind of our trends edition and looking back on the past year so we can kind of talk about what we're going to see in the future. What would you say were some of the consumer behaviors or market conditions that had the biggest influence on how loyalty strategies have been designed or how they've evolved over that past 2025 year?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of areas of evolution in 2025 actually tie together. So I think one that's not going to be a surprise to anybody is consumer spending and the cutbacks that happen, the rising cost of goods that have challenged brands. But it also made customer loyalty and retention more important than ever. Brands are having to increase prices to keep up, which is having a huge impact on a lot of the spend-based loyalty models, making rewards more expensive, really forcing brands on like pulling back on promised discounts, which can get kind of tricky. So we've been helping a lot of brands kind of navigate that evolution and how they bring more value to the relationship beyond discounts. I think another one is really like expectations from consumers around earning value more quickly. They aren't really willing to wait to see value and not only like see it, but like feel value from brands. And I think like that feel has been become key as far as like building relationships. And I think this is really compounded because Gen Z has emerged too as this core audience, and all of these brands are trying to vie for their attention, but it's not easy. They're scrolling fast. Brands really need to pop and do even more to grasp their attention. And everything really needs to be like shareable or really personable to matter, which kind of dovetails into that notion of like the rise of personalization, which we all know isn't new, but I think with AI, it's now more attainable than it ever has been before.
You mentioned engagement, and let me play out that just for a second. I think one of the things, maybe it's just me as a consumer, but I've always found to be interesting and on the consumer side, but difficult on the the brand side, is how do you stay engaged? The challenge of staying engaged with somebody um, outside of the specific product or service that you're selling, right? So if I'm Taylor Swift, people care about what I'm saying because I'm Taylor Swift, right? Um, but as company XYZ, most of the time, as a consumer, I don't really care what you have to say about these other issues. It's really very focused on the product or service in hand. How do you advise people, to stay, what are the engagement strategies that don't feel like you're pushing it too much?
Yeah, I think one is kind of coming up with some different, content or just ways to, keep the brand relevant. So like one of the clients we work with is Wawa, and we run like their social media. And while convenience stores are like a very, high transaction business, not all of their consumers are coming all the time, but the way that they approach things from like a social media perspective and really looking at like what is like relevant and hot going on in the market and like tailoring the content in that way, I think has been really successful. And so it's kind of finding the right marriage between like what's right for your brand and then what consumers care about too, and like bringing those together in the right ways.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And maybe that's kind of a good segue into the next question. In terms of how companies or your clients, for example, are adjusting their programs or should be adjusting their programs, when you're doing an assessment, let's say for a brand new client, what are the kind of the clues that tell you, ooh, this needs a complete overhaul versus just some tweaking? Are there some specific things that really stand out when you look at a program that go, okay, this is not going the right direction?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is like when we see what I call like the foundation is broken, it's time for an overhaul. So when that core value proposition doesn't support customer needs or business objectives, then typically we're doing more than improving like reward strategy or communication strategy or recognizing best customers or really improving like that end-to-end overall experience. So like we have a loyalty framework that we use to score brands across like 9 different pieces of criteria. And typically when we see like brands score lower than a 20 out of 45 points, it usually indicates that like the foundation's broken and we're not just making like incremental changes and evolving. I think one of the more common ones that we see these days is like the discount rate being too high. And so we've helped numerous brands solve this problem. One of the ones that comes to mind at the moment is like coffee bean and tea leaf. So like they came to us and said, "Wow, our discount rate is really blown out of proportion. We're like the highest discount rate in the market, beyond our competition. So how can we pull back without upsetting our best customers?" And so for us, it's more about creating value throughout the relationship, making those best members feel special, giving like all of their members more flexibility and choices in the way that they're rewarded, and kind of optimizing the discount rate accordingly. And then, doing some things that are like extra special for those best members. So, we see that seamless experiences are really important from a member perspective. So offering things to like some of their higher tier members, like just like preloading free drinks to them, just that they can take advantage of something that like their competition isn't doing, that just makes people feel rewarded in unique ways.
And is that from a kind of evolving your program standpoint and a strategy standpoint? Is it really getting down to looking at let's say you're in the same space as as a competitor? Is it looking at what they're doing and very specifically saying, okay, we have to do something completely different than what the competitors are doing?
So in my mind, it's like 3 different things. So it's like, what does your customer that interacts with your brand care about? Like that's number one. Number two is like where your business goals lie and like making sure they meet those. And then like what's unique and differentiated from your brand. And like playing off of those 3 things together, I think are what makes like effective loyalty strategies work really well. So I know we actually had a different coffee client come to us and they're like, "Well, why can't we just copy Starbucks program? Because their program is really successful and it's been in market all these years and it really works." And it's like, well, you aren't Starbucks. And you don't have, tens of thousands of locations. You have much smaller locations. There's things that really make your brand special. And the reason why consumers choose you is different from the reason that they're choosing Starbucks. So you don't want to go and copy them. You want to do something that's unique to you, and that's going to make your customers love you even more.
Gotcha. You had mentioned earlier the concept of sort of time to value
Mhm.
and that measurement. I think it's a really important concept right now because again, as you mentioned, when I sign up as a consumer for a new program, that's the first thing I'm thinking, how much money do I have to spend? How many transactions do I have to do? How much time has to go by before I start deriving value from this program? What are some of the things the consultation that you guys are doing with your clients on that specific issue? Are there some best practices that are emerging? Are there some new sort of like rules of thumb that say if it's not, if the consumer isn't deriving value by X amount of time, then you're doing it wrong? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for us, like I agree. I think consumers do the math and they do a lot of the calculations. The way that we like to approach it is like creating meaningful moments from like the start of the relationship. And I think the key can be like early recognition that reinforces like belonging, and also looking at ways outside of programmatically to deliver value early. So, like a few brands that I think do this really well are one, like Camp Gladiator. So like when you sign up, you get assigned a coach, and that coach is like your motivator, and they help encourage you to get involved. They celebrate whenever you're checking in or attending workouts. your all of your progress is tracked through the digital experience, and like within that experience you're getting recognized for like early milestones, and then you get all of these recognition for like bigger ones with gifts for like t-shirts and things like that. So once you've completed like your first 50 workouts, they're giving you a t-shirt, but you've gotten all of these little micro recognition along the way. Or more from like the retail side of things, like Backcountry. So their whole thing is, loyalty is reinforced through helpfulness, not discounts. So like you get a gearhead expert that's available early on in the relationship. All of your educational content is tailored to your experience level. So it's like very personalized from the get-go. But I think even like very simple ways, like using like zero party data capture strategies within onboarding to ask customers a question and then deliver personalized value real time based on their response is like an easy, quick win to be able to like instantly build trust and value that kicks off the relationship in a really strong manner.
So definitely not kind of a one size fits all
Right.
scenario. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, and I imagine that some of the emerging technologies that are helping to achieve that are within the AI sphere at the moment.
Mhm.
Um, as AI sort of continues to become more prevalent, we're seeing, just when you thought you've heard the last possible story you could hear about AI or a news story, whatever, it just keeps on going and going and going. Um, what are the best use cases that you've seen for AI that kind of fit into what you were just saying? I imagine directly into that personalization arena, but are there some that stand out to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a lot of loyalty use cases out there that used to be hard to achieve. So like we have a growth marketing maturity model that we use with clients, and a lot of these strategies actually were on level five, out of five. And so like as we work with brands to map out like where they are today versus where they want to go, a lot of brands don't choose level five because of the level investment needed to get there. And so I think what once was really hard, now is attainable for brands. And we really work with clients to help maximize the value of their technology. So a lot of technologies out there now easily enable things like, next best action for customers, predictive churn, even looking at like proactive recognition for retention or optimizing offers and even benefits to ensure brands are only offering like the minimum effective dose rather than like over discounting or over rewarding. And so, like, as a strategist, I'm always helping brands prioritize these use cases as the right customer data and the right technology exists to do so, helping them achieve marketing maturity and results a lot sooner than they used to be able to before this existed.
Well, it's an interesting point. Let's take a step back on that. I mean, you know, what you're describing is already supposes that the client, your client in question, has certain capabilities or access to um, programmers within that AI technology space and so on.
Mhm.
But when you look at the breadth of your clients or new clients that are coming on board, are most of them, you know, do they have the capability to begin implementing this stuff? And what are the gaps that you're seeing in organizations? Is it a talent gap where they don't have people who are up to speed yet on AI technology itself, or where are you seeing the pitfalls there for folks?
Yeah. So I think one of the places that we like to start is one, maximizing the value of their existing technology. So a lot of like, for instance, like the marketing automation tools of the world, like the Braces, or even like some of the loyalty technologies, like the capillaries of the world. Like they have some of these things that are like innately within their systems. And so we kind of start by maximizing the value of those. But we also have essentially like models around like digital transformation and AI readiness to have conversations with customers from that perspective too. And I think, there's several different gaps that we see. Like one is like cultural readiness. Like does the organization think in a way that they're able to like act on and learn from AI and adapt? I think another piece is like the data infrastructure. And while it doesn't need to be um, perfect. We need to know like where the solid data exists versus where it doesn't, so that AI can personalize and predict effectively, because it's not really going to work without a solid data foundation. I think another key is like ownership, like who owns what, like who's making the decisions and who also owns like the protection of the organization and the customer. So, like, even when you do know who owns it, so oftentimes there's like fear or reluctance in letting AI like make the decisions, which can slow things down and kind of lean back into that cultural readiness. And then I think like talent is another one. AI is changing so fast, it's hard to keep up. So I know a lot of agencies are training, talent as quickly as possible because they see so much value in it. I know one of the leaders in our company likes to say, like, it's like giving your talent power tools, like to do their job like more efficiently and effectively. And I know that's one of Bounteous' big objectives this year is making sure that, our workforce knows it. But there's a big mix of what we see on the client side as far as like AI readiness and the fact of like willingness to adopt it or not, and like having the right like cultural mindset in order to be able to do it. So we're kind of helping each client individual navigate that.
And what about just people's, clients, sort of understanding of AI as a whole? Are there some things that, again, to your point, things are moving very, very quickly, but are
Mhm.
there some notions that clients had about AI, a year ago, 2 years ago, that are no longer valid at this point? Like, what are some of those misconceptions that people come to you and say, "Hey, what about this, this, and this?" You're like, we've moved on from there, or that's not quite right at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like there's three kind of myths that come to mind. So like one of them is like AI driven loyalty is all about content generation. And while like content is a piece of it, but a lot of the power in AI is like using it to like make decisions, prioritize content, and like orchestrate like multiple touch points to be able to enhance like end-to-end customer experiences. So like we have an AI experience pattern framework that we created that combines like components. So think of that as like a lot of the surface layer with like how consumers are interacting with the brand. So as they're interacting with like different digital components or things like that, or like clicking on a certain thing or hovering on a certain thing or, making a certain purchase, and then pairing that with like different patterns that we see within the response. And that's able to deliver like different experiences to customers that go beyond content alone. Another one is like the perfection of data. So I kind of touched on this a second ago, but it's like if your use cases are really thoughtfully designed, where you're leveraging data that you know is correct, that's a great place to start. And then you can like roadmap the rest from there, knowing that your data needs some evolution too. And then the third one is like, kept hearing like AI is going to take all of our jobs. And I believe that the people in the workforce that like learn how to use it and it can help you like propel you forward rather than overtaking. It's just kind of a better tool to make you like more powerful, more efficient. But like AI isn't going to be running enterprise loyalty on its own. Like it needs loyalty marketers to guide it, and really make decisions and like bring things together holistically from the enterprise level.
And you bring up an interesting point. The people who are generally responsible nowadays, I think this is an accurate statement, for the loyalty programs. It's sort of blended together where it used to be there was very specific group of people who are responsible for loyalty versus marketing versus whatever. And I think those things have really begun to blend together, as well as the use of the tools that you were just describing, the people who are responsible for that.
Mhm.
Um, do you see loyalty at this point and the principles that loyalty programs use, or is that being applied more holistically throughout an organization at this point? Whether it's through the use of AI, whether it's looking at something from a customer experience standpoint at every touch point, that may or may not have everything to do specifically with loyalty. How are you seeing that play out at this point? Is it more of a loyalty, more of a holistic approach in an organization.
Yeah, I think the organizations that are doing it well definitely take that holistic approach. I love the fact that like loyalty and marketing has come more closely together. I think other areas in the organization where we're seeing, loyalty and really the data of loyalty have a great impact are like one like customer service. And also like employee enablement. So for instance, like, priority routing from a service perspective. So looking for like, your high value or long tenured customers. So, I've been very loyal to American Airlines. When I call the 1-800 number, somebody picks up almost immediately and can solve my problem instead of waiting, on hold for hours at a time. Um, Even like proactive goodwill gestures. So like also been a long time customer of Verizon and, been there for over 20 years. They randomly just sent me like, hey, thanks for your loyalty. Here's a 20% off discount for your monthly bill for the next year, which is really a nice surprise and delight. But also looking at like empowering frontline employees with loyalty, context, and data to be able to, make better decisions, make customers feel special. So we work with First Watch, and like their whole thing is like, loyalty as an outcome. It's not like a programmatic thing. And their employees are a huge piece of that experience. And so basically giving them the context, but also the empowerment and the autonomy to be able to like surprise and delight members and make them feel special, and that they're important to the brand, I think is key. And then also using data across like, products, services, experience, roadmaps, really leveraging the consumer insights to guide like roadmaps and like what the future of the organization is doing. So, looking at product evolution, that could be informing like new product launches or new services, or even things like within the experience that create like more habitual use or just reward people on like tenure or engagement. But it's this whole notion of like, your loyalty data is now shared throughout the organization to make everyone, the way that you do business, more intelligent. So it's not just an asset for the loyalty or the marketing team anymore, which is great.
Well, and with all that, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little about measurement
Yeah.
and I guess as things have evolved to the point that they are now, um, are you seeing some key measurements that used to be um, the primary thing that people were looking at to determine whether loyalty was a success or not, you know, are some of those outdated? And if so, what are those things that you would advise clients? Yeah, that's an outdated figure. You need to be looking over here. What are the new KPIs as well?
Yeah, so I think when loyalty programs focus more on like campaign or programmatic focused approaches rather than like customer focused approaches, then sometimes they're struggling to find like the real value in their overarching strategy. So, like, there's some KPIs that work okay for like campaign led related things like redemption rates, open rates, short-term lifts, but they're not really acceptable measurement criteria when you're looking at like how to measure loyalty from an organizational perspective. And so, looking from the business side, looking at things like overall profitability, but also looking across not just business metrics, but like customer metrics, brand metrics, can also be like leading indicators of things that are happening. So looking at things like customer lifetime value, the retention rates, and looking at the retention rates like across your different segments too to dive a little bit deeper, but also looking at like advocacy rates or even like emotional health scores and things like that, can tell a broader story than just some of those, basic metrics as far as like, oh, our membership grew, X number of people, or, you know, this percentage of people were redeeming something. While some of those, it's important to keep a pulse on them, they're not going to tell the true story of the value of the program. And I think more and more, like, especially C-suite as executives are looking for like, what is the value of it to the organization? How are we driving true loyalty with our customers? Not just like, oh, what did XY Kim Z campaign do, or how many members joined the program this year?
Gotcha. So a higher level sort of return on investment, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so as we look into sort of sort of the predictive section of our discussion, um, you know, what are the things that you think that will be part of loyalty programs moving forward that will really differentiate, program A from program B and the success? Does it relate to that KPI, to that overall return on investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it relates to that. It also relates to like the brands with that customer first mindset that are like leaning into those differentiators that we talked with. Like those are the ones that are gonna win. And I think we've all come to the realization that like loyalty isn't about points and perks. It's really about like creating relationships. And those are built on, relevance, value. And so like being able to bring that to market in a way that feels like a more personalized, trusted relationship rather than like a bunch of marketing tactics strung together, really designed about like what's meaningful for the customer, what like dovetails nicely into their life, not just about like what the brand is trying to like incentivize or push from a business perspective. I think that those are the brands that are really going to stand out and win, and the other ones are really going to struggle.
And when you're doing, doing those assessments for new or existing clients, are there some that just sort of, you look at certain programs and it drives you crazy because you're like, oh my gosh, guys, you're missing, these couple of things. If you would just do these few things moving forward, and I know it's a gross generalization, depending on whether it's a product or a service or whatever the case is, but are there
Mhm.
a couple that you could point to that says everyone out there really needs to pay attention to these couple of things?
Yeah. I mean, so every brand has a unique situation. So like we always start with a loyalty audit to really dive into like what are those top gaps and opportunities to uncover like within their loyalty strategy and experience. But I think one is kind of making sure that from like a measurement perspective, you're really understanding how your program's performing, understanding like what your customers want. Like if you're not getting ongoing feedback from your customers, you're probably missing the mark. And you're going to learn a lot more about the why behind your metrics if you're getting that ongoing feedback and creating that two-way dialogue with the customers. And then I would say the other one is like people aren't willing to deal with experiences that are really hard. Like consumers just give up these days. And so making sure that your experience is really easy to use, is easy to interact with the brand. I think those two are table stakes. I would say the other criteria are definitely important, but I think a lot of brands, if they don't have at least those two things in place, they're not really setting themselves up for success for the long run.
Gotcha. Well, Ellen, thank you for joining me on the Leaders in Customer Loyalty podcast. And we are looking forward to hearing more from Bounteous throughout 2026. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It was a delight. It's a happy new year to you too.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in to our Leaders in Customer Loyalty podcast series. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Leaders in Customer Loyalty podcast and follow Loyalty 360 on YouTube and LinkedIn. The links are provided below. Please join us every Tuesday for another edition of our Industry Voices podcast.